Welcome to this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have Davina Hehn. She is a therapist turned mental health coach, and she is also a podcast host. Welcome to the show, Davina.
Thank you for having me.
You are welcome. Welcome to the show. Welcome to India in this online form, Davina. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe will benefit from what we are going to talk right now. We'll talk about how one can master anger, how one can resolve conflict. All this we'll talk about, especially for parents and all. We'll learn from you all of that. But before that, let's learn a bit about your journey, your background, so that people know who they are listening to.
So, yes, trained as a therapist, learned that not everyone has a diagnosis, that a lot of us are really just lacking critical emotional literacy skills. So, that was more of my professional background. I got into anger management in an attempt to fix my husband because I recognized that he needed the work and I was not skilled to help. And so, I went and got certified and then also learned that I am the problem too. And so I got to recognize where I'm contributing poorly. And then we became parents, and that changed everything. And we weren't equipped. And a lot of the traditional therapeutic parenting advice just didn't work and didn't feel practical and realistic. And so I started developing my own through research backed scientific strategies.
Absolutely, absolutely, Davina. So, I want to understand through your own understanding of it is that let's touch on anger first. Means, why do most people struggle with anger? What is it that they are getting wrong about it? And also about managing it. How should they look at managing it? Because it all happens. You get angry. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, it triggers so quickly. And what I wish we would all recognize is that anger is a really good, beautiful emotion. It's a preservative emotion. And if we were able to separate the anger from the aggression, and the aggression being the way that we express it, if we could separate those two and recognize that the anger isn't the problem, it's a problematic solution, is the anger, is the aggression, and that's why it gets so much of the focus. But anger inherently is notifying us of injustices, letting us know when we feel powerless and voiceless. It's really a sense of advocacy for us. And so when we're starting to work through this, we have to recognize that it's giving us a message and it's up to us to decipher what it is. And from there, we develop new and different strategies to communicate more effectively and cope with the discomfort that comes up with the anger, but instead use it as fuel for change and advocacy and empowerment, as opposed to something that needs to be stifled and shoved down. We just aren't taught how to effectively navigate these things. So then it gets a bad reputation, and then we learn that feeling anger is bad, and therefore we shouldn't feel it at all. And then, of course, it volcanoes.
Absolutely, absolutely, Davina. So, how should we understand? See, people use different words about all these things, especially if we talk of anger. People talk about, anger management. So, there is this word called managing anger. Now, how do we
Mhm.
understand? Secondly, you just talk about navigating anger. What does that mean? Also, you talk about regulating anger, and one is the suppressing anger. Are these four different things, or we can club just a few things in one bracket? How do we do that? What is the best way of looking at anger? Because it's a natural emotions. God has given it for a reason, just like stress, except that we may be looking at it differently, negatively, perhaps.
Yeah, I think they all kind of fall within this realm of anger management, but it's emotion management. And I didn't know what anger management was before I got trained in it. I just knew what it looked like and then assumed that anger management is the best thing for it. But anger management is really just managing our big emotions that we don't know what to do with. And so when I talk about navigating through anger, it's more so about viewing it like a wave And we just need to be able to recognize when a good one's coming and get up and be able to ride it through and get through it safely without causing collateral damage or drowning. And so what we want to be able to do is navigate through, but overall it's all falling within this one bracket of knowing who you are and what's coming up for you, what this feels like, how to identify your emotions in your body, and then manage the discomfort that comes from that in order to develop actionable strategies to actually remedy it. And then the regulating the anger is more so about regulating our nervous system, because anger triggers in the same part of the brain as our survival. So when we fear for our safety, and that part of our brain just hasn't evolved yet, it's our reptilian brain. So when we fear for our safety, we can't tell the difference between an actual threat to our lives and our partner rolling their eyes at us, or our boss giving us a poor review, or our child ignoring us for the 17th time, right? It's really hard for that part of our brain to recognize it. So then this triggers and we go into full blown fight or flight. That part of our brain shuts down our frontal lobe and prevents us from being able to think logically. And so the best kind of way to navigate anger is by getting ahead of it. So we enter into a prevention model versus just a, repair and clean up the mess model.
Absolutely. Let's understand it this way. Let's look at it from the point of, collateral damage. What are the what is the damage that anger can cause if it is, part of our system? Uh, because it has, as we said earlier, because it's part of our system. Fight or flight response and all that. And secondly, in terms of misconceptions about managing anger, what are some of the very prevalent misconceptions which we must know about?
Yeah, I mean, first, the collateral damage is one, some of it is more obvious because it's physical, right? We're harming ourselves, we're harming others, maybe our property, damaging things around there. The the other part is, yes, hurting other people emotionally and wounding them. The biggest culprit, like the biggest collateral damage that we cause is actually within ourselves. It causes heart disease and increases our risk of cardiovascular disease. And even after we experience more of like an anger expression, right? We are 8 times more likely to suffer a cardiac event within 2.5 hours after that, right? Because we're releasing so much cortisol, we are constantly within a state of fight or flight. And so our body doesn't get the opportunity to rest, digest, and recognize that it needs to get to an equilibrium. And so we're kind of just within this constant survival state, which is why we're irritated by so many things. We have a so much difficulty in staying clear minded because we're constantly just assessing for threats and misinterpreting what actually is one versus what isn't. And so that's one of the biggest misconceptions that I have found is that it's an inherently bad thing, and that it's instead this way of winning. But when we express our anger through aggression in the way that we typically see it, we everyone loses. I don't know anyone who actually wins. And one of the major things that we see most often is that the person who's expressing their anger poorly through aggression, they typically have valid complaints. It's just their way of expressing it is so problematic, and that causes that damage. So then that becomes the new problem, and then they can't go back and address their original complaint because they caused damage and now they just need to apologize. And then once they apologize, they can't walk it back because then it feels like they're not actually sorry. And so then that just fuels it more. It's really just a disease of being unheard and not feeling like I have any power or any voice in what's happening. But unfortunately, the loudest one in the room tends to be the least one heard, and then it perpetuates.
Absolutely, absolutely, Davina. So, how do we uh, show our anger without aggression? What is the best way to, to deal with this emotion of ours? Should we become saints? Should we go to the jungle? No anger required for anyone, and we'll be all very great human beings. How should we look at, in our when you are in society, you deal with many things. It can make you angry. It can make you, even in relationships, even in the state of society, even with the political decisions, including so many things. So how do we, what is the best way of dealing with this?
Yeah, a lot of it is going to be within a prevention model, right? And it's still getting angry, right? Like I still get angry quite often. Anyone who tells you that they don't experience it, I don't know how they do it. I don't necessarily believe that to be a true form of it. I'd imagine that we're just hyper controlling it. But more than anything, it's going to be about prevention, about knowing ourselves, listening to what our body is telling us. It's kind of the way that I conceptualize this is 2 pots of water on the stove, same size, filled up with the same amount of water, burners running at the same height, at the same intensity, and one started with ice cold water and the other one is starting warm, if not hot. And so they have the same kind of experiences, but if we're not cooling down as things go, as the days go by, as our sleep happens, as our days go by, then we're starting off hotter. And then we will, of course, boil. And so the best way to manage anger is to get ahead of it by learning what actually fuels your anger, what triggers it, what keeps us at a very high temperature. And then we slowly reduce. But more than anything, we keep the anger. I don't want you to put it away. Otherwise, we get walked over. We hyper control these things and then it comes out in one way or another. And typically it's either our emotional, physical health or somebody else's when we just don't know how to navigate it. So I want you to feel it. I want you to experience it. And instead of just acting on it, it's more so about sitting with it and listening to the message that it's trying to tell you.
Absolutely, absolutely, Davina. Now, if we look at it from a point of conflict resolution, then how do we still manage to show that you are angry about certain things and that you can still have those conflict resolution, both in personal sphere as well as in professional life, in office? How do you do that?
Is really just coming up because I don't have a solution to a problem, right? And it tends to be a built up level of frustration and or just a fear for safety. But for the most part, there is this buildup. And so when we are wanting to let people know that I'm upset about this, that I don't appreciate it, that I need something to change, it's going to be about the presentation. If we only voice our anger, we're just venting out energy. We aren't focused on a solution. So, whether it's personal or professional, we recognize the anger that we're feeling. And rather than ruminating on it and focusing so much on why we're angry and where that's coming from, we get more into a solution oriented mindset, which then says, okay, this is how I feel. I am upset about this. What can I realistically do about it? And then we verbalize that. So within our home setting, it could be, hey, I've recognized that this is really bothering me. I do notice that this sparks anger within me. Can we talk about a solution? And professionally, it can be somewhat similar, right? Like when these experiences happen, I notice myself feeling frustrated by it. Could we work together to find a solution so that this can be remedied? And it's more so just using the energy that you're putting toward building yourself up and being that own aggressive hype person for yourself and instead putting it into something that will actually get you the results, the remedy, the solution, and the equilibrium within you that you're actually craving.
Right, right, Devina. But how do we do that when it's related to not about immediate things, but about generational patterns? You talk about that generational patterns can influence our conflict resolution strategies. Now, that's a very difficult person for, especially in an office environment. You can't have them that all that in anyone's resume or biodata before dealing with them. How do we do that?
Yeah, I think it's more so about having quick strategies that we can implement ahead of time. Within the screening process of hiring, there are certain assessments that can take place so that we can kind of get ahead of it. And while I specialize in anger management, I run these assessments on every one of my clients because it's important to know how we hold anger. We all experience it, and some of us will be external expressors and some of us are internal expressors, and it's really hard to tell the difference. But the person who's expressing loudly is going to be more obvious and therefore take the spotlight as opposed to the person who might emotionally punish or manipulate or do these types of things in order to get their way. So we work on in the moment strategies that buy us even just milliseconds so that our frontal lobe can stay more online long enough to calm our amygdala down and not allow for it to hijack. And so we do techniques like humming, which the vibration stimulates the vagus nerve. It allows for our parasympathetic nervous system to come back online. And therefore, our fight or flight can kind of reduce because when the rest and digest parasympathetic nervous system is activated, we're not actively in danger. And so we kind of have these little tips and tricks that we can do that are based more so in our body as opposed to just telling people to remember to take deep breaths. It's good advice. It's just only good once we're already regulated. So in the moment, we want quick strategies, quick tools like using ice therapy. Um, we can eat something sour quickly. You can go into a door frame and kind of push up against it. You hum, which is one of my favorites. It's immediate. You don't need to carry anything with you. I always recommend having some sort of token on your hands, whether it's painting one nail, getting a new ring, writing something on the back of your hand, whatever that might be, that when your hands are in front of you and when we are externally expressing, we have something visual that will kind of remind us of the work that we're doing and realize that when we're trying to break these generational patterns, we're trying not to be someone or some way, but we aren't choosing where how we want to be instead. And so we say, I don't want to be like my mother or my father or express anger in this way. But okay, well, what are you going to do instead? It's focusing so much on the problem instead of the solution. And so then we get to pivot into I don't want to be my dad. Okay. Well, what are you going to do when you get angry? When I get angry, I will hum. I will walk out of the room. I will listen to my body. And as soon as my heart starts racing, I will say, need a minute and walk out. Right. It's choosing what to do instead of just trying to avoid what I don't want to be.
Absolutely. So the best way to know about, the generational patterns is to watch our parents or someone beyond that, and we'll come to know whether we want to follow that example, or we want to create our own patterns which are better and which are helping us create better workplace or personal relationship. Is that what you mean, Davina?
Exactly. We are really great at giving advice and really terrible at taking it. And so, what I'd want for you to do is look at your family pattern as objectively as possible. Write it down, not even with names, but just go through the family tree and see what types of behaviors you see. And if you were looking at someone else, another family, what guidance would you give them? What advice would you want them to take? And then that's the advice that you take. And so we just have to pull ourselves away just the tiniest bit to view ourselves at all objectively. And then we get to diagnose these things. We get to see where these patterns lie and then use our more rational, higher order, like wise mind brain to determine what to do with it next. But we can't read the label from inside the jar. And I have my own providers because I can't see myself sometimes. And we all just need some help, some outside perspective to show us our blind spots.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now let's get to the parenting part of it. Why do kids get angry? Means they do not have any reason to complain, or do they have many reasons to complain? So kids get angry, the parents get angry, and it becomes very difficult to resolve a conflict which nobody knows what it is all about. Help us understand all this dynamics. What's the best course of action here?
Yeah, I mean, kids are just feral, unhinged little beings. They don't have the capability in their frontal lobe yet. It's not even developed. I think by age 7 or 8, their frontal lobe is about 25% developed. And so they are just raw emotion all the time. And when we weren't taught this emotional literacy growing up, we're matching them. We're kids inside in adult bodies. And so when our kids get activated. And when that causes us to get activated, we are showing them what to do when they feel a type of way. And so we have to kind of do our best one to reparent ourselves in these ways and teach ourselves the emotional literacy that we weren't given. And then through that we model it with our children. We share that with our children. One of the biggest mistakes that I think some of us make is just telling our kids what to do, like what the rules of the game are, instead of what the objective is and why we are playing. So when I started doing this work, even with all my schooling and all of this, I still wasn't literate emotionally. And I share this with my sons and I tell them, hey, I wasn't taught this. We are learning together. And I'm doing my best to give you a head start, a head start 30 years after mine. And so it's really just leveling with them and helping them see that they have big emotions in a little body, and we just have to work together to find ways to work through it. But that's really going to be so much effort there, and children are naturally going to behave the worst with the people that they feel safest with. Why we also do that with our spouses and our family members, because they are constants and we are more likely to get forgiven by them and get some level of unconditional positive regard. And so when our children are unmasking and great at school and great with their caregivers and then feral with us, it's really it feels like an insult, but in reality it's the highest form of emotional praise that they can give us, which is showing us that they feel safe with us. And sometimes we are the ones causing them the most harm.
Absolutely. So you talk about, tough parenting without guilt. How does that happen? And you also have this parental shift program. Tell us a bit about what tough parenting is all about. How can one do it without guilt? And also about your parental shift program.
Yeah, so you know, there's a lot of misconceptions in parenting, and I think sometimes we fail to recognize that two things can exist at once. And if we can accept multiple truths, we can say that parenting is wonderful and beautiful, and the universe is a better place because my children are in it. And good God, this sucks. And a lot of the time, I don't like this and I don't like the responsibilities. And this is really hard. And sometimes when we express that to people who don't agree or are not comfortable acknowledging that, we we view that as shame and judgment and guilt, and we kind of just go within ourselves. And what the parental shift program is really all about is not just about children, because I'm not a child development expert. This is more so about just the parent, about how to navigate all of these responsibilities, have a tribe to go to and share these experiences with, and be able to know that you're not the only one, that we can work on these things together and have a community of people who we can rely on and learn skills. And what we notice is that when we start doing this work, our family and our friends are the first ones to really push up against it because we've conditioned them to expect a certain version of us. And when that happens, it makes us pull back. And so I want us all to have a community to go to where we will encourage each other and help each other rise, as opposed to tell us that like everyone has a hard time and maybe you should just keep that to yourself. So this is really about empowering the parent as they are, helping preserve their marriage and their relationships, their in-law relationships and all of these types of things, but also do this in a way that models that behavior for our children and hopefully raise children who don't have to heal from their childhood. So we're doing we welcome
Absolutely.
new parents on the third Thursday of each month. The first 30 days, no matter when you start, are completely free, no commitment, nothing. We just want you to come in and join us and get the tribe that you're looking for.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So for those people who are, who want to learn more from you, about your program, about from your podcast, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
Yeah, so my podcast is a great start. It's called Shift Talking. It's a little cheeky. There's a lot of foul language. Please don't listen to it with your children present. So there's that. And then my website is A Steady Space is the name of my practice. I want you to come on in, find your balance, and move on. And then any of the socials, my tag is A Steady Space on all of them.
Wonderful. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.